Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this project, I'm going to create a class roster that lists the name of students and their exam scores. This was part of an assignment to practice basic Python programming functions. As you can tell by now, I will be using the Python programming language for this project. So let's begin. This is actually a very simple project. The instructions are specifically to write a Python program which can store the name of the students in the class and their exam score. Only one exam score, in fact. And the program should be able to first calculate the average score for the students and print the average scores once you finish entering the students' names and the scores. And secondly is to summarize who gets the highest score and who gets the lowest score in the classroom. What we're going to do is to create a function with no arguments as input. So basically when we run this function, all it does is just print out or display the results of the calculations that we did inside the body of the function. So let's first you see here, this is the text editor program that I'm using to create the file, the Python file. So first let's save this file, save as, and let's save it at for example here at the desktop, and let's name it as roster.py, which stands for a Python file. When we save this as a Python file, the text editor will recognize that the text or the functions, the codes that we will be write in this text editor will definitely be Python functions. So let's begin. To create a function, to those of you who don't know, to create a function in Python, you use the def function and the name of that function. Let's just call this roster, parentheses, and colon. Like I said, there will be no arguments to be input inside, to be placed as inputs for this function right here. And in the body, what we're going to do first is we're going to create an empty dictionary to store the names of the students as the key. In dictionaries, in dictionaries we have key value pairs. So for the key part, it will be the name of the student, and for value it will be their exam score. So first we write here, create empty dictionary. Let's just call it students, an empty dictionary here. And now we're going to ask the person who is running this code to put in the number of the students in their class. So for example, that class might have 30 students, or one other class would have 20 students. For example here, input the number of students in the classroom, just so that we don't get confused with Python class. That is actually a different topic. We're going to store the number of those students in a variable called numStudents, and here we're going to use the input function so that the person who runs this code gets to put in the number of those students. That is what the input function does. So basically we're going to write some kind of like a text or a prompt for the person to put in the number of the students. Let's say that we will write a short sentence. Please enter the number of students in your class. Okay, so next here, we're going to add the names and the scores into the empty dictionary, this empty dictionary that we have created earlier. Student names and scores in dictionary. And to do this, we're going to use a for loop for num in the range of num students. We're going to loop this according to the number of students that the person running the code will input in here. Okay, so as you can tell, we're going to use the range function for on the num students variable here. So obviously it has to be in a numeric format, because for running this to run the for loop, the number of times that we're going to loop this, the range here, has to be in numeric format. When we use this input function here, it's actually going to, the values that the person inputs here, in this case in num students, it will actually be in a string format. So we're going to convert the numbers here from string to numeric by using the int function, so that when the person enters the number of students in their class, for example, let's say there are 5 students in that class, at first it will be stored in as a string, but then because of this int function here, it will be converted into a numeric format. So inside the body for this for loop, we're going to ask the person to put in the names of those students. Again, we'll be using the input function here, and obviously because it's a name, it's going to be a string, so we're just going to use input function, and we're going to store this inside a variable called name student, name underscore student. And we'll also ask the scores, the ASM scores. And sometimes the ASM scores can be in, like for example, it doesn't have to be a rounded up number like 79 out of 100. Sometimes some students receive scores in say in with decimal places, for example 79.5 out of 100. So those numbers with decimal points, like right there, is obviously under float data. They are considered as floats, sorry. So we'll put the values that the people put in as the ASM scores inside this float function here, and store this in a variable called score student. So now we're going to store this inside our dictionary. We're going to specify the name of that dictionary here, which is students, and for each of the students' names, name student, we're going to assign their scores. So we're using this dot title method here, so that we can say that the person who enters the name of those students, they enter it in lowercase, using all lowercase characters. Like for example, let's say you put in the name Mary, and Mary, all of those letters are in lowercase letters. So if we use this dot title method here, it will convert the first letter of that string, which is M, into a capital or an uppercase character, an uppercase letter. Obviously because they're names, so we're just to make it look, presentable, we're going to convert the first letters of each of those names into an uppercase letter. So now that we now have the names of the students and their exam scores. So now let's calculate the average score. This is where we're at. We're going to add all the values so that we can calculate the average. Just to be clear here, what we're going to calculate here is that we're going to get the average score that the student that the class will receive. So let's say that class is on that class's subject. Let's say that this class has the subject of mathematics, for example. So basically this program actually will try to, if some of you are not clear yet, this program will actually try to get the average score inside of the average mathematics score inside of that class only, because obviously here only one score, only one exam score is assigned to each student here. We're actually going to calculate the average later on, where we're going to for me, I'm just going to calculate the average while we're printing out the results. So we're not going to store those results in another variable or anything. For me, I just calculate them inside the print function, which you will see later on. So that is why I'm going to say here add values so that we can calculate the average later. And first, let's create those variables, the values that we will be calculating for the average. I'm going to call the first variable as sum underscore here, because the sum SUM is actually a built-in Python function which obviously calculates the sum of the values that the vectors that we provide inside that function. So because it's a built-in function, meaning that it has a specific meaning inside the Python programming language, we can't just use the name sum as our variable name. So that is why I'm using this as sum here. So this sum underscore value will originally be set to 0, and another one is this underscore sum, also set to 0. And then we're going to use a for loop. We're going to loop inside the students dictionary here, where we're going to we're going to store the number of students inside our variable here. For this, it will be the number of those students. Here it stands for we're going to increase by 1, increments by 1, because for example there are 5 students, so the sum value here will definitely be 5. And for this underscore sum value here, we're going to put in students I. This underscore sum value will store the summation, because this is we're using this plus equal sign here, meaning that we're adding those values together. The values of the students' exam scores. This is what it means here, students in square brackets I. And as you recall, in the instructions that I mentioned earlier, we're going to display a summary of who gets the highest scores and who gets the lowest score in this classroom. So we'll exit this for loop here. We're going to find the maximum and the minimum scores, and we're going to, not this course here. And we're going to display them. We're going to be using a function here where it will get the score and the name of that student. Separate them. I just write this so that you can see clearly, in case you're typing this along. So we're going to separate them by names, by their names and their scores. Here we're going to use a zip function. It's called a zip function in the Python, where the arguments inside this zip function here will be combined together as a tuple. In this case, we're going to combine together the scores and the names. The highest score inside the student's dictionary, inside this student's dictionary here, and also the name of that student, the name of the student who received that highest score. So it will be students using the values method here, students keys, basically the names of those students here, and we'll wrap this up inside this max function here, because it will find the values, in this case the highest exam scores, and it will match with the name of that student who received that highest score. For this, we will store inside a variable called findMax. So we'll do the same thing to get the lowest, to find the student with the lowest scores. The lowest score. In this case, we'll be using the min function. Again, we're going to wrap this argument, the zip argument here, similar to what we did for the maximum scores, but we'll wrap this up under this min function here. All that's left to do now is to print out the results of this function that we have, of all of these, these lines of codes that we have done. First, what we're going to print out, what we're going to display are the names of those students and their scores. And again, we're going to be using the for loop. For each of the items inside the student's dictionary here, we're going to print out their names and their exam scores. So what we're doing here right now is we're going to format them like this. So we'll be using this format method here, where we're going to substitute the name here. An item here stands for the students' names, and we're going to put them here, and here is their scores. To get the scores inside that dictionary, we're using what we did is we specify the dictionary that we're using, and inside the square brackets here we specify the key values of those dictionary. In this case, it's the item iterating object here. Sorry if I said that wrong. And then what we're going to print out next is the average score inside that classroom. Print average scores. Basically it's just print, and let's say average score. So earlier here, like I said earlier here, we have created these two variables, sum underscore and underscore sum here, which stores the values of the exam scores and also the number of students inside the classroom. So basically, just to get the average, all we have to do is just divide this number of the total exam scores, divide them by the number of students that that the class has, and we're going to wrap this up inside the float function here, and let's display the average score rounded up to 2 decimal places. For that, we're using this round function here. Next, we're going to find the student with the highest score. Again, the print function here, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this plus function here to combine the strings that we will be writing down right now. Again, I'm going to use the dot format method here, like I did earlier. Okay, I'm going to use this dot format method here so that I can substitute the name so that I can substitute this this curly brackets here with the name of the student with the highest score that we have stored earlier in this find max variable. Find max 1, just so that in case some of you didn't know, the indexing for the Python language here begins at 0. So if I say find max 1 here, it means that I'm going to get the second value inside the tuple here. It's a tuple which contains, I'm going to repeat again what we have done here using the zip function. It's a tuple. The first element of that tuple will be the exam score, and the second element is the name of the student with that score. So in this case, first what we're going to do is we're going to write down the name. For example, if this student named Mary has the highest score, so here it will be Mary's name. We're going to combine it with this short sentence, has the highest score, which is, and again we'll be using this format method here to substitute this curly bracket here with the exam score. In this case, it is the first element inside the find max tuple. To get the name to find the student with the lowest score, we can just copy this code here and just substitute it, change this, find the student with the lowest score. For this, we will be using the values inside the find min variable. So for example, let's say here we have a student named John. He has the lowest score, so here it will say John has the lowest score, which is whatever value is inside this find min variable here. So before we'll see this in action, I just want to make it look more presentable. I just want to make the final class report here, the final display here, to be more, let's say, more pretty, or just to make it look to make it look more presentable here. So first, so at the top, at the beginning of the process here is that we're going to input the number of students in the classroom, and we're going to ask for the names and their exam scores. So basically, we're collecting the students' information. So let's display a short, let's say like a short heading here, collecting students' information, and let's separate it with some dash line. Okay, let's try to stop this here, I think. Okay, and now to print out the results of the calculations that we have done earlier, which is to display the names and the exam scores here. Let's start by creating another header. Let's just call it as, let's put this inside this here, class report, and I'm going to add, I'm going to add some dash line. It's basically going to create like some sort of a box. Sorry if it doesn't be correctly aligned. And because we will be displaying, first we'll display all the students' names and their scores. Next we'll display the average score, and then next we're going to display the student with the highest and the lowest scores. So for me to make it look more presentable, I'm going to separate them with just the dash line. So I'm just going to copy this one right here and add them at the bottom. Sorry. At the bottom of each of these functions. And lastly, I'm just going to print out end of report, and it will be separated with another dash line. Okay, so let's save this file. So we're going to run this file here in our command prompt. So I forgot to add one more thing inside our file, our Python file here, which is we're going to run this roster function. We name this function here as roster, so we're going to run this roster function here inside our command prompt. So we're going to see this happen. We're going to see this in the command prompt. I'm using Windows, so it's called command prompt. If I'm not mistaken, for Mac computers, it's called the terminal. Those two means exactly the same thing, right? I kind of forgot. So let's open the command prompt, and since we save our Python file here in the desktop folder, so we're going to change our directory here to desktop, and we're going to run our function, our Python file here, which we have called roster.py. Okay, so this is the first step. Please enter the number of students in your class. So let's say we have 2 students. Enter the first name. I'm just going to use the names that I mentioned earlier, such as Mary, and the score is, I'm just going to press any random numbers on my keyboard. Say Mary has the score of 58 out of 100, for example. The next student is John, and let's say he has 89. He scored 89. So this is our class report. Mary here has 58 exam score. The exam score for Mary is 58. John here has 89. So the average score for the students inside this class is 73.5. John here obviously has the highest score, has the higher score between the 2 students here, which is 89. Mary has the lowest score, which is 58, end of report. So this is basically our this is the outcome, the output for our project right here. So basically this is the end of this project. If you have any questions or there are parts that you don't understand, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video or you might have learned something new from this, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this in the future. Thanks for watching.